Thou shalt not castrate thyself. This is the first official canon law of Orthodox Christianity. Hang on, but I thought it was love thy neighbour. This is what was decided at the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE. So I wonder how many men were actually saying goodbye to their little Johnnies to make this the first official canon of the Holy Roman Church. Origen is probably the most famous Christian forefather who is reported to have done this to himself. He took Matthew 19:12 quite literally. It wasn't a new idea. The high priests of the cult of Sibyl had been doing self-castration for many centuries. They did it in order to prove their devotion to the great mother of all gods. It seems not everyone in the ancient world had castration anxiety.
Well, this is awkward.
I wonder if this is how transgender men in ancient times achieved social acceptance. Origen obviously wasn't the only Christian priest to do this to himself. Otherwise, Council of Nicaea would not have made this the first canon law. And it's important to note that it was only self-castration that was outlawed. If somebody else did it to you, then that was okay. You could still be a part of the church. This means that centuries later, when the popes and bishops wanted to hear the heavenly sounds of castrati, they could do so without breaking their laws, because it was someone else who sadly mutated the little boys. The early Christians fall under three main categories: the Jewish Christians, the Gentile or non-Jewish Christians, and the Gnostics. These three different groups had very different interpretations of the teachings of Jesus. So when Emperor Constantine decided that he wanted to make Christianity the official religion of the empire, he gathered together 318 bishops and church leaders from around the Mediterranean. They gathered in the town of Nicaea in order to have a meeting and decide upon what Christianity was supposed to be. There were many deaconesses in early Christianity, but none of them attended the Council of Nicaea. It is from this attempt to unify the religion that we have the Nicene Creed. We believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty, maker of all things visible and invisible, and in one Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the only begotten of his Father, and the first 20 canons. All these canon laws look very dogmatic to me. They're mostly concerned with the clergical's behaviour. Oh look, here's one for everyone. No kneeling on a Sunday. But hang on a sec. I was raised Catholic. I'm pretty sure we knelt during our Sunday services. In my last video, I had a look at what early Christians looked like through the lens of the Book of Acts. And I made the point that I believed that Christianity was never meant to be a coercive religion. However, under the influence of Constantine, I believe that's what became of it. Many people, myself included, suspect that Emperor Constantine's decision to make Christianity the formal religion of the empire was motivated more by political reasoning than spiritual ones. Constantine took a peaceful group of believers and formed the foundations of a religion which went on to have a lot of destructive behaviours. Now, the main point of the Nicene Council wasn't actually to debate castration. The main point was to decide whether or not Jesus was actually the same substance as God. It's known as the Arian or the Trinity debate. This debate very much intertwined with deciding whether or not Mary conceived immaculately. It took the Nicene Council about 2 months to debate this. Now, the idea of a virgin birth was not something new. In Greek traditions, there are actually many other men who were claimed to have been born to virgin mothers, two of the most famous being Plato and Alexandria the Great. So the precedence there for that idea of a woman being able to conceive without male sperm was already present in Hellenistic societies. The Romans, they also had a history of upholding virginity in women as being very important, which can be seen really clearly in the imperial Roman cult of the Vestal Virgins. The Vestal Virgins were priestesses of Vesta, tasked with maintaining the sacred fire in her temple in Rome. So it's my view that Christianity before the Council of Nicaea was a cult with a little c. However, following the creation of the 20 canons and the Nicene Creed, it became a cult with a big C. The ironies of what became of Christianity after the Nicene Council are hard to overlook. What began as a revolutionary movement that allowed a diverse set of interpretations got transformed into a rigid belief system governed by a hierarchy that mirrored the structure of the Roman military. Losing autonomy over one's body to a dogma and identity politics is troubling enough. But what really strikes me the most is the reversal of fortune. For centuries, Christians were persecuted for resisting the state religion. Yet once Christianity became the state religion, it turned around and persecuted others. Surely this is far from what the crowds in Nazareth heard 2,000 years ago. I believe it's important for Christians today to understand that the Bible as we know it today did not exist for 100 years or so after the Council of Nicaea. If anyone believes that contemporary Bibles are the authentic, inspired Word of God, they are putting a lot of trust in Emperor Constantine. I still sometimes meet Christians who think that the Bible was written by first-hand eyewitnesses. The Bible was compiled by a man called Jerome, a job that was completed roughly 100 years after the Nicene Council. Jerome completed the task by collecting scriptural writings from around the Mediterranean. His objective was to compile writings that actually aligned with the Nicene Creed and the 20 canons. Allegations of forgeries or sloppy scribe work are plentiful. See Dan McClellan for more precise details on the history of the Bible. These are significant forms of coercive control, and it is for these reasons many great minds, for example Isaac Newton, kept their opinions of biblical errors to themselves. Not saying that this was Jerome's fault, just saying that there was a directive to make sure that the Bible aligned with what was agreed upon at the council and what was written in the creed. I'm not the only one who suspects Constantine's council did not get it all right, but at least I live in a world in which I can say this without fear of being burned at the stake, brought before an inquisition, or placed under house arrest. Even a few hundred years ago, objecting to church dogma would result in harsh punishment, namely excommunication and social ostracization. These are significant forms of coercive control. Some forms of Christianity should be called Constantinity. I'm going to go through my 12 criteria now. Authoritative leadership. I've given this a number 3. The reason being that the bishops exercised absolute authority, condemning any dissent and establishing a binding doctrine. For control over information, I've given this a 2. The reason for this is that information and the doctrine that was established at the Council of Nicaea was very tightly controlled, with heretical views being suppressed through excommunication. And following on from this also came talk of external damnation. By the way, the idea of hell as being an eternal place of damnation for anyone who disagreed with Orthodox Christianity wasn't a feature of early Christianity. The idea of hell actually came from the Zoroastrians. Deception? I've given this a 2. Orthodoxy was presented as absolute truth, potentially oversimplifying or misrepresenting dissent. There is also some evidence to suggest that in order to support the decisions made at the Nicene Council, there was some forgery of some of the gospel and epistle writings. Exclusive knowledge? I've also given this a 3. The reason for this being is that the creed's content was declared as indisputable truth with divine authority. Now for exploitation, this is actually the only criteria which I've actually given a 0 for. The reason being that there was no evidence of labour, financial or sexual exploitation within the creed or the canons. I'm just assessing early Christianity here. The exploitation of castrati and altar boys came much later. For fear, guilt and intimidation, I've given this 1 a 2. The reason being is that fear of heresy and excommunication was used to enforce compliance. For isolation, I've also given this a 2 because anyone who disagreed with the Nicene Council version of Christianity were declared heretics and they were excommunicated. Micromanagement of daily tasks, I've given that a 1. The reason for this is that while clerical behaviour was very tightly regulated, general believers were not as tightly controlled. Monitoring thoughts and or behaviours, I've given this 1 or 2. Both clergy and believers were monitored for adherence to orthodoxy, and as the church progressed, we see more and more inquisitions taking place and excommunication of anyone who didn't follow the beliefs of the Holy Roman Church. For punishment and discipline, I've given this 1 or 2. While there was a limit to structured punishment, the notion that people could be shunned and excommunicated is really quite a harsh punishment for disagreeing with church dogma. For thought reform, I've given this a 2. The reason being is that the systematic indoctrination through the sacraments of baptism, confirmation, reconciliation, and so forth, all aligned with Orthodox theology, and there was a lot of pressure for people to believe exactly what the newly formed Roman Catholic Church dictated. The us versus them mentality, I've also given a 3. And like I said in my previous video, I think this particular mentality actually increased once Christianity was Romanized and it wasn't as strong when Christianity was more segmented into different types of groups. So the reason why I've given it a 3 here is because heretics were explicitly condemned, which fostered a really strong division. So overall, I have given the Holy Roman Church at the point of time when it was officially formed through the Nicene Council a 25 out of a potential 36. So when we do the maths on that, 25 divided by 36 and then multiplied by 10 and rounded to the closest whole number, we come up with a number 7 on my overall ranking of cult behaviours, 0 being a benign group and 10 being the most destructive. 7 is still quite high and indicates a group that is most probably going to cause some sort of harm to the people who are subjected to these sorts of behaviours. The bottom line is that when Jesus of Nazareth wandered around Jerusalem, I don't believe that his intentions were ever to control people through acts of coercion. And it is really unfortunate that people have used his teachings to harm others in such a way. I know many wonderful, loving, peaceful Catholics, and I believe that the Church has a lot of noble qualities. I want to stress that my assessment of the Holy Roman Church is focused on the leadership structure of the 4th century. It is not meant to imply anything about Catholics either in the past or in the present. For the most part, it's the parishioners who are the victims of coercive control tactics that have been orchestrated by leadership. The Church has changed a lot since its establishment under Constantine, and I rank contemporary Catholicism as being a 4 on my scale of cultic behaviours. This indicates that it's still a bit cultish, so some cult-like characteristics are noticeable, which may raise concerns, but they are not inherently harmful. Some individuals within the group may experience negative impacts, however, generally it provides a positive environment for most parishioners. I believe the improvements in the Holy Roman Church is a testament to the power of transparency and people having the courage to speak up about religious abuse. As a thought experiment, imagine what would happen if a modern Nicene Council was gathered today in which Christian leaders from all different denominations came together to create a canon. What would you want the first 3 laws of Christianity to be? For me, I'd want the first one to be groups that use excessive coercive control tactics, which would be anything above a 7 on my scale, and not permitted to operate. Number 2, Christians shall not deceive people through misleading or exaggerated claims, which means no false representations, lies, or withholding information during recruitment or at any other point in time. And number 3, would be isolation tactics are not tolerated, either by overt physical restriction or covert methods of manipulation. When the Holy Roman Catholic Church was established, it was the cult of Constantine. Let me know what you think the first 3 canons of Christianity should be in the comment section below.